all over again. Oh my gosh, this is epic, awesome sweetness. All right, so go ahead and type in the bar. I just want to make sure that this is working. All right. I am so sorry. Like this is the joy of technology. This is maybe why we get to choose to do teleconferences. But hopefully this is working so we can actually have this conversation. So we'll see. All right, Tony's going to be joining us here in a second. All right, so all right, let me see. Yes, no, is it working? It seems to be good now. Okay, so we got some people, we got some positive affirmations saying that people are joining us. So yes, we're just going to trust that this is going to work and that Tony's going to be able to join us again on this one. Um, Once again, I apologize for the technology challenges, but this is once again our test from the universe, just to make sure that you guys are really committed to having so much fun tonight and being able to have like a really amazing conversation. Tony, welcome back.
This better be good, man. This better be really good because we've done, we've done a number on this technology.
I know. So a number on the technology, a number on the people. Let's see. Yep. We've got a confirmation from people saying that we're good to go.
Awesome.
Oh, this is so fantastic. All right, they can see and hear us now. Boy, Tony, okay, you ready now? Are you ready to really kind of like have like this amazing, now that we've kind of built up all this anticipation and people have had to go through all of these challenges to be able to join us. Tony, what's in store for tonight? What are you excited to talk about?
I want to really dive in and talk about these just the different energies of the masculine and feminine, and how, and in a useful way, not just in a theoretical way. Because to me, it's like, okay, great. You talk about the different components, but how do you take these and make a really good relationship? And from the male standpoint, in the book that I'm writing, I talk a lot about how do you manage and channel the energy from a male's perspective into creating a really powerful relationship. And so let's dive in and talk about those.
No, that's fantastic. So once again, for everyone that's joining us, what I'd love to kind of find out from you guys is where are you guys joining us from? And this is really like our intention is to make it feel like you're kind of in our home with us. And like Tony's all the way in Idaho. I'm here in Cottonwood Heights and Salt Lake City, and so and I know we got people joining us from everywhere from Las Vegas to New York to even some people overseas. So I would love to find out where you're joining us from, and then throughout this conversation, like if you have burning questions towards the end of the call, we'll be able to answer some of your questions and then go into that. But before we do that, I kind of want to have you guys get to know both me and Tony a little bit better in a little bit informal way. Tony, if you're good, like I have a couple questions I want to ask you, and have you share what is one thing that you want them to know about your business and what you do for work professionally?
I guess what I would like them to know, you're hitting me on the spot on that one. The work that I do in terms of relationships and personal development training, I want to be transparent as I can get myself to be, in order to serve people to live their life more congruently and to be able to deal with their shadow side. I think that's a real issue that we have as human beings, is dealing with the side of us that we don't like. And I found personally, when I come to peace with that my life it runs more smoothly, my shadow doesn't run me as much. And so I want to, I guess through my stories and through my experience, help you to love yourself more and find greater self-acceptance, and in that, have more cohesive relationships.
Awesome, perfect. So tell us a little bit on just one or two things about your family and your family life.
My wife, Bree, and I married 16 years. We, at about 10 years in, we were getting divorced, and we both went through a whole bunch of transformation, and it was a bumpy ride. It was extremely challenging in lots of different ways for both of us. And through this experience, learned to actually make the relationship work, and to where it's working we really both enjoy the relationship. And I don't want to suggest that that means we don't fight. We had a doozy of a fight the other night, like maybe a week ago. But the difference this time around, like in the midst of our fight, you know, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're kind of badgering each other in our room. And in the midst of this, Bree says, this is the fight we're going to talk about at the next Live Big, isn't it? So we try to take our experiences and learn from it and convert it. But we have 5 children, and our home life is remarkably chaotic and insane, except for the early morning hours between like 4 and 7 a.m. Bree and I are both writing books. And so we are up at between 4 and 7 a.m. in the quiet of the morning writing, and then all hell breaks loose after that for the rest of the day.
The joy of having 5 kids and two busy people creating things. So tell us one thing that not many people know about you.
One thing that not many people know about me is that I was a janitor in a bar, and I got to see things that I didn't even know existed.
Like what?
I don't want to talk about it, man.
Now you've got
I can't even explain it. I cleaned up stuff that I don't understand. It still perplexes me.
Oh, that is so funny. Yesterday I went to this trampoline park, and one of the coworkers just came in, and it's like this young teenage girl, and she came in, and she was like, "Oh, I just picked up a glass and it was full of throw up in the parking lot." So I can. She's like, "Why would someone do that?" She was definitely traumatized by that. So anyways, so we're going to dive straight into the conversation, and tonight, once again, we're going to be talking specifically about relationships and how to create more passionate, intimate, fulfilling relationships, and what are the blocks that often prevent that. And one of the things that I've noticed through my research and my journey, you know, and my discussions with so many different couples is a lot of people don't understand the roles of the masculine and the feminine and this dance between the two. They don't understand how polarity works in terms of communication, in terms of each other's needs, and in terms of sex and intimacy. And so our hope is that as we have this conversation, you, whether you're a woman, you'll understand more about the feminine nature and how to be in that feminine, and also how to invite your man to step more fully into his masculine. And if you are a man, we'll help you understand the different stages of manhood and how to step more fully into this very powerful space of being what I call a conscious man. So as we start this conversation, Tony, I'm kind of curious in your ideas and your thoughts. Like, what is it do you think that causes the most friction in relationships when people don't understand the role of the masculine and feminine?
Well, our society has these flipped, and so women have been told from the time that they're a little girl, often from society, that taking on masculine traits are going to be really good for them. And they often have to. I'm not making a judgment. This is an observation. But in order to survive, in order to have approval, they'll be encouraged to take on what typically in nature are the more masculine traits. And it's a safety mechanism. They do this to survive. And so then as they get older and older and older, women tend to be better men than men. And they tend to be more.
What do you mean by that? Like when you say they're better men than men, what are you talking about?
There's this idea of men in the culture that they're supposed to be strong, and they're supposed to be resilient, and they're supposed to shoulder things without a lot of emotion, and they're supposed to be reliable and dependable and assertive. Kind of in the business world, this is the idea of what we look at the CEO of a company and we think that person has their emotions held together, and they have this strong aspect. And women, and I do a lot of executive coaching, and a lot of my clients are women at really high levels in organizations and companies, and they tend to be in this place of they're better men than men.
Do you think it's always been that way, or do you think that's kind of a result of the feminist movement? Like, one of the things I always think is like the feminist movement kind of destroyed femininity, right? And it taught women that their way to achieve value in the world is to operate from their masculine, and in doing so, they kind of not only lost a little bit of their feminine softness, but they also kind of emasculated than men. Do you think that's always been the case, or do you think that it's kind of, the result of the last, 50 to 60 years in our culture?
Yeah, so in the book that I'm finishing, I'm talking about ancient man. His way to succeed was really simple. He had to provide food and he had to provide shelter, and he created offspring. Right, that's how he succeeded in his tribe, and so that man was really encouraged to be in this protective, strong hunter role. Right, that was the masculine energy. Then we had industrial man, which he was supposed to go to the factory, and he was supposed to be like a machine without emotions. And then we had modern man, who the expectation for modern man shifts about every 2 weeks of what it means to succeed as a man. He has to continue to acquire and have this appearance of all these different things. And so the shift that happens with the feminine movement, which I'm not opposed to the feminine movement, and I have 3 daughters, and I have a wife who is not a traditional. She wrestled in high school. She didn't take traditional feminine roles. She was on the men's wrestling team and wrestled guys. And so I'm not opposed at all to women having whatever roles that they choose to have in society. But let's talk about the energy of the masculine and the feminine. The feminine energy in a little girl is this wild and expressive. It's stormy. It wants to express itself in lots of different ways. And I say this because I have 3 daughters, and I watch this. And then what happens is they start to get to school age, and they start to be encouraged to take on traits that are typically the masculine trait, right? More scheduled and structured and assertive and all these different things. And it's not like that's bad for a woman to develop that. The challenge that happens once they come into a relationship, because they come into a relationship, and when they start dating, if they bring out their feminine, it becomes really attractive to the man. And the feminine the analogy is more like the flower in nature. It draws the bee because of its allure, because of its smell. It doesn't force anything. And that the pheromones that a woman releases when she's in that sexual energy, when she's aroused, cause a man to be incredibly attracted to her. And then what happens is the relationship comes together, and the man's able to be Prince Charming and give her flowers and do the kind of masculine things. And then what happens the minute that something goes wrong in the relationship, the switch flips, and she goes into masculine role of get the job done, fix things. And she lays into her man of like, what's wrong here? And the man's tripped out about it. He doesn't know what just happened. He's like, well, what happened to that, the fun and the playful and that thing I was attracted to? And it develops what one of my friends, and she coaches CEOs and their spouses, and she's done this for 25 years, and she calls this the bitch wimp syndrome. And I'm not trying to call people bitches. The bitch wimp syndrome is the woman begins to hammer down on the man because she wants him to change, and he hunkers down and he becomes wimpier and wimpier. It's like on Back to the Future. You remember the first Back to the Future on the that part where it's like the reverse reality or whatever, the alternate ending.
Yeah, and totally Biff, this big man became like this little wussy man that was
polishing his car. Hey Marty, hey, I got your car all waxed up, man. Hey, here's your keys. Thank you, Biff. Right, Marty's in this masculine energy, and the problem is that the women, because they've been trained that when they're not safe to protect themselves, they go into masculine. And it drives the man into a shell, and he stops taking the masculine role, and then the women are pissed off. They're like, what is wrong? Why is this guy not manning up? And I've had a lot of women, when I talk about this, and they'll come to me, and they're very successful in the different things that they do in the business world and in lots of areas of their life, and they come to me, and they're mad at me and say, what's wrong with this man? What's wrong with this relationship? And I'll talk about this a little bit, and then they'll be kind of mad and say, well, how do I fix it? How do I change this? And the magic of this, I finally met someone like 2 weeks ago who finally brought this together in my mind, because I haven't had an answer to this. I understand the feminine energy because I can see it when a woman is in her feminine energy. And I can, Dr. Christiane Northrup, she talks about this. She wrote a book called Women's Wisdom, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, I believe. And she talks about that when a woman is in the feminine energy, she releases pheromones. And those pheromones cause a man to have an erection whether he wants to or not. I mean, he can literally just be like sitting there, eating and smell the pheromones and have an erection. And for guys, that's just totally normal. It's just like, oh, I'm just having an erection. It just goes on and off through the day, right? So they don't think anything of it. But there's this incredibly strong allure when a woman is in that feminine energy. And the place of the challenge that I have that I've seen is, in order to take off the shield of the masculine energy, to take away that heavy armor that they've carried, because they have to go out in the world and provide, and they have to go out in the world and achieve, and they have to go out in the world and do things that women historically have not had to do. That taking off that armor is incredibly vulnerable. It is so scary, it is so dangerous, it is so risky that they don't know how to go into that dangerous place. And the way that I have talked to some women and how they've accessed this is through dance, through physically moving their body in sensual ways and tapping into that movement and that energy, which is that wild feminine energy, and accessing that in their physical body. And when they do that in a relationship and they're able to go to that place, it transforms things, and it brings the polarity back to the relationship. Because when a woman shows up in her masculine, and the man tries to show up in his masculine, and he gets beat down by it because he's trying to please his woman, he doesn't know what to do, and he doesn't know how to stand up and be a man. This is a problem that men have. They don't even know how. That when the woman learns to access that femininity, the man rises into this place of being masculine, and they have that dynamic polarity that creates attraction.
Yeah, and that polarity is like super important, and I see this like being a major factor in a lot of relationships where there's either that, two people trying to show up where either the man's too much in his feminine and he doesn't know how to show up, or the woman's too much in her masculine and it becomes this reverse polarity situation and there's no attraction there, or both are trying to show up in their masculine, and that ruins a lot of relationships because they're like you were talking about, there's no attraction. It's not like there's that intimate connection that happens when there's a correct polarity, because polarity really is just like magnets. It's what creates that attraction. But
and Joe, can I add one caveat, because I don't want to make this sound like women who are assertive and strong are doing something wrong. This is the world in which we live, and succeeding in business and succeeding in corporate culture and providing often require a woman to take on those masculine traits, which is fine. And they develop them, like I said, better than men do. They're more reliable, they're more predictable. But in order for the relationship to work, they need to create the polarity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And switch that.
And there's also, as we talked about different personalities, like there's women that are just naturally in their warrior energy or naturally in their oracle energy, which tend to be the more masculine energies, and that's normal and that's okay. And then there's roles that they have. Like Melissa just mentioned that there's a lot of times in relationships where the woman has to work. She has to be a producer. She has to provide. And whether that's because, her man's not showing up, or because it's just a situation where both of them need to provide. Work in general, money in general, is a masculine energy. It's an energy of producing.
Yeah,
so
and
the question is in terms of a healthy relationship, like that's super good and super great for women to be able to be that. But there also has to be a transition in the relationship for the relationship to work, where the woman can allow the man to step up and to be that man, and for her to learn how to relax into her femininity when it's appropriate. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't want to make this sound like women that take on the masculine traits are doing something negative. They're not, and they do extremely well. And that's fantastic. I have daughters, and I teach them the masculine role, this masculine energy, because I want them to do well, and I want them to be able to provide for themselves. And my wife is engaged in writing a book and in doing other activities, and she does events, and those things all require different types of energies. But it's in that loving relationship, and particularly in the sex relationship, that the feminine energy is this thing that has eluded these women, and so then they come to that the relationship, and they can't understand why their man is such a wuss. And so the magic is when they can access that. And like I said, one of the ways to do that is through physically moving the body and getting into sensuality, getting into that wild, free energy that was so clear when they were a little girl, that will create the polarity. That's the magic piece there.
Yeah, so let's have this discussion a little bit because I think this is a really valuable conversation for a lot of the women that are on this call. Is just simply how do you tap into your femininity? How do you allow that to come? How do you nurture that part of you? And then likewise, I'm interested in talking a little bit about how to get your man to step up into being more of a man, both in life and also in the bedroom. So I want, for those of you that are listening to actually write your comments and ask yourself this question: what are the things that allow you to step into your feminine? And what I've noticed, as I've studied more about this and really understood more about the role of the feminine, sometimes guys are frustrated because they don't understand women. Like they feel like, they just can't understand women. And I'm
You
like,
think?
and I'm like, that's because women aren't meant to be understood. The whole feminine nature is about change and evolution, and it's like the weather. Like their emotions are constantly evolving and constantly changing, and they're not meant to be placed into a box where you understand them. For us guys, we want there to be a box that says, this is what women are, and this is what they're not, and this is how I understand them, because we're so linear in the way that we think. But women aren't that way. They're all about evolution and all about expansion. They're all about this dynamic of growth, and for the women, their core needs is to be loved and cherished and respected. But in order to do that, the man has to drop the idea that he'll ever understand her. It's more like just stepping into just allowing her to be her wherever she is, and just appreciating that it's this ever-changing, being that he's creating this moment with. And when the man can release expectation that he'll ever understand it, his wife or the woman in his life, I think it makes it a lot easier for him. Because the masculine energy is about order and structure and stability, and it's about understanding, and it's a very mental energy, where the feminine is a very heart-centered energy. And it's all about connection, love, trust. It's all about opening. The man's mindset is all about simplifying it and creating this simple awareness. And so for the woman,
it's interesting, Gerald. If you look at the masculine energy, it's almost like a protective shield. It's this armor that a guy goes out into the world with and faces whatever he has to face, and he doesn't, like, feeling historically has not been really important for men. And it's interesting because our society has changed so dramatically in the last 50 years. Evolution has not caught up with it. I was reading that it takes thousands of years of evolution, of passing genes down, to actually change the human genome, to make a shift evolutionarily. And so even though we live in this modern world, our genes that we were all given are still the genes that 200 years ago and 2,000 years ago were what were successful back then. And so for the man, he has to go out and he has to get hyper-focused, and he's the hunter. He has to go out and get hyper-focused and shield himself against cold and pain and being unfeeling, and then he has to put his life at risk to try to kill the saber-toothed tiger and not feel it and go for that adrenaline rush. That's what was success back then. It's why women still like the bad boy. It's why women still like the guy that takes the risks, because instinctively, even though he's not a very good provider nowadays, in modern society, those skills, that risk-taking activity and that dangerous behavior does not necessarily result in money. And so, but women are instinctively attracted to that man because for thousands of years, he was the best provider. He was the one that would take the risk. And so for the woman who now is going into this masculine role of providing, this hasn't happened historically. It only happened once birth control came into the scene, and women had a choice as to when they got pregnant. And so now women are going out, they're going into this provider role. And again, there's no judgment here, it's just an observation. It is what it is. And they put on that thick armor. They have to go out and not feel. They have to go and push themselves through deadlines and schedules, and they do better than men at it, quite frankly. They're more structured and they're more organized when they take on this masculine energy. And so the key is coming back into the relationship at home, learning to flip the switch, because in order to take this off, the vulnerability is so high. And the reason the vulnerability is high is because you can actually get hurt when you take off this armor. It's why men don't show up with their feelings very often, or not as often, typically in a relationship, because they can actually get hurt if they show up with their feelings. And so the reason that this is scary for all of us, men and women, is because we can actually get hurt. There is a risk. We take off this protective thing and enter into a relationship. There's a huge risk.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think the risk of not being willing to risk is the fact that we aren't able to create that connection. And it's true that many men struggle with that connection. Just a core part of masculinity is learning how to be vulnerable, learning how to be open, because they're so used to sheltering. But at the same time, in the relationship, women are craving for the men to just be vulnerable and to be authentic and to be real and to drop the mask and to start showing up with a little more sensitivity and compassion. But for the women, in the space where they're discovering how to reclaim their femininity, one of the core chemicals in the brain for the woman to be able to cope with stress and to be able to deal with life is estrogen. And there's core things that women can do to build the estrogen, and estrogen is really kind of the feminine hormone that helps create that balance. So for instance, anything that you do to nurture your emotions elevates estrogen in your body, whether it be hanging out with friends or going in and having a meaningful conversation with someone, doing something just for you, going to the spa or getting a massage, or going and even shopping sometimes can be an estrogen building activity because you're learning how to nurture yourself. And all of these things help you step more and more fully into being in that feminine. And the feminine energy, once again, is about creativity. It's about exploration. Nature is a great way to connect to your feminine as well. One of the things that I heard which was really interesting, was this thought that, and I'm not sure where the research came from, but I heard that it takes about 30 minutes for a woman to step back into her feminine after she's been in this masculine role. So for a woman who is going and work and she has to produce, she has to clothe, she has to make money, she has to meet all these deadlines and be in this masculine role all day at work, for her it's super healthy to be able to have this window of time after work where she can go have a bubble bath and just let her mind relax, or to go for a walk, or to do something that's going to help her allow this estrogen to fill her body. And that's really interesting. Any other thoughts that you would offer, Tony, in terms of how a woman can activate the feminine, and also like how that affects sexuality in that relationship as well?
Yeah, so part of it is unstructured time, and the way I would recommend doing that is actually scheduling unstructured time, which kind of sounds funny. You have to sit down and actually schedule out a block of time that then becomes unstructured time. And I would suggest you put away the phone, you put away any of those distractions that would pull you back into the world of having to be structured, and block out time where you can go into nature, or you can write, or you can be expressive, you can do these things. Within the bedroom, because of what I said earlier, that taking this armor off is incredibly vulnerable. And a lot of women I'll talk to about this, the thought of them expressing themselves physically and sensually and being in this energy is too scary. Like they just go, no, that I don't know how to get into that with my man. What if he rejected me when I expressed this wild energy that I've been suppressing because society taught me to act like a man? And what I suggest that you do is, because it's so vulnerable and so scary, is that you do this alone first. You block out a big chunk of time, and you lock your door, and you put on some really sexy clothes, whatever that means for you, something that just makes you totally get into you. And I've had some women say, well, I don't feel like my body is sexy. And it's so interesting to me, because My wife started asking me this when we started having this conversation several years ago. She goes, so she'd say, is that woman sexy? We'd see some girl walking by, and a lot of times my wife would point to women who were the typical society sort of model standard of what sexy was, and they would have on really designer clothes, and they would have their hair really done up, and they'd have a lot of makeup on, and they'd be really skinny. And it was like this idea of models that we see in magazines. And she'd say, it was like the Paris Hilton kind of look. She'd say, well, is she sexy? And to me, there was no allure. There was no draw. And I would say, she doesn't have the sexual energy. And then a woman who was, 50 or 70 pounds overweight would come by, and she was into her body. And I would go, she's hot. Like, that woman has something that makes the bells go off in my head. And my wife would look at her and go, well, but she's not skinny, or she's, doesn't look this way or that way. I'm like, it's not about body size. It's not about any of those things. It's that she was into her body, and she carried this feminine energy it is crazy when a man gets around it. So what I'm suggesting, regardless of where you are in your own physical body, the key is to tap into this yourself. So lock the door, put on some sexy stuff, put on music that really makes you feel and express and move your body. Dance and get into the sensual energy and feel what it's like, and do this for a while on your own. And if you're in a relationship, tell your partner you're doing homework on how to be more sexy. He's going to think it's awesome. He's going to be like, awesome, when do I get to see it? He totally will. But get into this place of practicing accessing this femininity, and it's got to be in an unstructured space. The structured thing is a masculine energy. So block out a big chunk of time for you and really get into feeling in your body and allow yourself to feel that sexual, powerful, wild, expressive energy, and then you can transition that into your relationship with your partner. But do it alone first. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and I think for the man in the relationship, there's so many things that you can do to help and support the woman to be in her feminine. So just knowing that there's a part of every woman that just craves the opportunity to just let go, to be able to relax, to not have to have it together all the time. She wants to know that you as a man can create that space and that structure and that safety for her. Her core needs, especially as it relates to being willing to open up intimately, is she wants to feel safe, and she wants to know that she can trust you. She wants to know that you are a man that can handle her and her emotions, and that you're not going to run from her, or be a little boy. She wants to know that you're confident, and that you're purpose-driven, and that you're really secure in who you are. And when you can be that, and when you can encourage her to nurture herself, and then when you can really be patient with her and allow her emotions to be whatever they are. Sometimes she doesn't even understand what her emotions are. Most of the time, she doesn't know what she wants. And as a man, we're so linear thinking, but for you as a man, you get to understand your objective isn't to try to fix her. It's not try to put her in a box. Your mission is to make her feel safe, to expand, and to open, and to feel free. And when you can be that and just know that your job is to create a safe space for them, then you'll know how to listen and to say the things that they want to hear, so that they feel loved and cherished and appreciated and validated. And so for a man, one of your primary ways to allow her to access that femininity, and also to create that emotional intimacy that is the prelude to the physical intimacy for a woman, just to be able to be present with her during conversation, and rather than jumping in and trying to fix the situation and saying, well, we'll just do this, or hey, you got this problem, here's the answer. You just listen, because she's not looking for the solution. She's just looking to be understood. And when you can say, oh, I totally understand that. Oh my gosh, that sounds really hard. Really? Tell me more about that. And you can just give her space to communicate on her own. Then all of a sudden, she feels safe to open up, and that's when the flower blossoms, and that's when this very sexy, erotic energy emerges from the woman. And then when she's feeling that emotional connection and safety, and there's those little touches and all of those things, then there comes a point as a man where, she wants you to pick her up and carry her to the bedroom and to take her so that she can feel like you're taking charge as a man. But that taking charge only works when she feels emotional safety and trust in the first place. But when she does, it's like when she knows you're so strong, like in the bedroom, and you're so powerful, that it gives her permission to be untamed, to be free, to be able to let her wild side out, because all women have that. They all desire to be sensual and to be sexual and to be, allow their inner sensual goddess to emerge. But it requires that space of stability from the man and that strength where she knows that she's safe to experience that. And so those are some things that a man can do to help her woman to step into that femininity. But oftentimes women, they get so caught up into all of these tasks, and their minds are so busy that it's hard for them to relax. And so for a man, sometimes we get to support her by saying, please go take some time for yourself. Hey, what can I do? Can I take care of the kids? What can I do around the house? Don't worry, I've got this. You just go out with the girls, or you go for a walk, or I've got things covered. Go get a massage. All of these things we can do as men to support our women to be able to feel like they have permission. And that's one of the things that a lot of women crave. Is like, yes, I just want permission to be me, to be who I am, and also to take care of myself first. So Tony, what are some things that you think a woman can do to help inspire her man to be more of a man? And maybe before we jump into that, maybe what are some core things that a man can do who maybe has lost part of his masculinity? What can he do to step more fully into that space of confidence and strength and really all the things that represent a man? What are your thoughts there?
So I'll talk about a couple of those. When I was about to get divorced, really what was happening in the relationship was I would show up like a boy, and it was incredibly unattractive to my wife, and then she was taking the bulldozer route, and she was kind of henpecking me about all kinds of things. It was the bitch wimp syndrome, classic. And so I would show up like a boy, and ultimately what it came down to was my issue was my sense of worth as a human being, and my sense of being a man was tied absolutely into if I could sexually please my wife and if she was turned on by me. And this had been since I was 12 years old. My sense of worth came if I could get a girl to like me, then I just felt like this incredible man. And once I was married, when I was dating, it was really easy to have a girl be turned on because it's new and it's fresh and it's exciting and it's fun. And then once we were married and kids started coming along and I had more pressure on me, so I was spending more time with my business, and my wife's needs were going unmet because I didn't know how to meet her needs. And I would show up, and the only way I knew how to reach out was try to come on to her physically. And I would show up so wounded and so easily hurt that she would push away. Naturally, of course she would push away. Like the women that are watching this are like, ew, that's gross. Like this is gross energy of wimpy little boy showing up, to reach out that way. And so of course she would push away, and then I would become, it hurt so bad. It would just drive in this feeling of not being good enough. And so the very first thing a guy's got to do is he's got to uncollapse those realities and get to a place of self-acceptance, independent of his wife has ever turned on by him or his girlfriend's ever turned on by him. He's got to get good with himself and fix the stories that say he sucks or that his worth is dependent on a woman being turned on or him being able to please a woman or him being able to have a woman like him or any of those things, and get good with himself, because that's the beginning of the masculine energy. So I can tell all these tips and tricks. I can teach a guy how to make his wife turned on. I have a book, an ebook that I wrote. I call it it's the art of seduction outside the bedroom. How to make your wife hot for you is basically what it is. And so I can teach all these tips and tricks, but if ultimately at the foundation of who the guy thinks he is that he thinks he's not good enough, then he will not be able to stand in the masculine energy. It'll just be a show. It'll be pretend, and he'll be easily knocked off his little perch. Because what's going to happen is the woman's going to challenge him. She's going to try and see if he's for real. And so ultimately you begin with this place of being good with yourself, and then I really think you have to learn the skills of how to turn a woman on. And men are mostly taught by porn, right? We have this porn culture that teaches all the wrong messages of the masculine and the feminine. Well, but the reason men are attracted to porn is because the women in porn, they're paid to pretend like they're really super aroused by the guy. And so that's that wild energy that guys can go there without making any investment. In real life, to help a woman access that type of energy, the man has to create a space where she can show up. He has to make a tremendous investment in time and energy and money and resources to create a space where the woman feels safe enough to be able to be wild and free. And they don't understand those steps, so they expect to be able to pull a lever and have something happen right then. It doesn't happen. They go, oh, this woman's broken. I have to go find another woman. And porn is an easy way to go and find a woman who, for a couple $100, will pretend like she's in the feminine energy. So it's this cheap way to access this illusion that I'm a desirable man. That's why guys watch porn. But it leaves them empty, right? It's a hollow. It's like eating marshmallows all day. You can fill your stomach, but eventually you're just so depleted that there's nothing there. So coming into this, the guy's got to get good with himself. And then next, he needs to learn the skills. These are skills. There's a recipe for making a woman aroused. That's what we talk about at Live Big. We spend like an hour, and oftentimes Bree will be up there, and I'll teach the men how to seduce their wives. And it's not what guys think. It's not like go and grab their butt and be like, hey, baby. No, it's all about what Gerald was talking about. It's that the best analogy I've ever heard was that women have this basket, and their thoughts are scattered about. And so what the man's job is to go and gather those thoughts into that basket. And so rather than trying to fix any of it, he's just letting her talk about it. And each time she talks about it, and he goes, oh, that's hard. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. She gathers another thought into her basket. And once all those thoughts are gathered into her basket, she can centralize her energy, and she can actually tap into her sexuality. If her thoughts are scattered about, she can't access her sexuality. And so guys have to learn these. There's a whole process to this, which I don't know how long we'll go tonight, but we can talk a little bit more about that in a little bit if we want to. But so that a man has to first work on his broken story about himself and get to this place of going, yeah, I might be screwed up as a man, right? That's what I teach in my book, is the real story of being the ultimate man is not that you have all your crap together. It's that you just stop pretending that you have all your crap together. It's messy. It's a mess. And so anyway, so the man has to get good with himself. Now, the flip side of that, and this is your second question, I've had quite a few women who are producer women. They carry the masculine role very well. They do very well out in the world. And they come to me and they go, what is wrong? This is my second marriage, and I have somehow shut down this man just like I did the first man I was married to. And what's the matter here? What do I do? And the problem is they're trying to take this as the bulldozer, and they're bulldozing their man, and he goes into that place. It's interesting, while you're talking, I started to think about what it was like as a man to be bulldozed and to be henpecked. And it, for me personally, having lived in this, and my wife is fine with talking about this because we have a relationship program where we show you all our junk, so it's not like I'm she wouldn't be bothered that I'm talking about this. She's the first to admit it. I'd show up wimpy. She would henpeck me and bulldoze me. And for me, being in that place, that experience was one of the most painful things I've ever gone through my whole life. To continually try to please this woman and feel like I was failing every time. Like no matter what I did, it just wasn't good enough. No matter what I did, I want
to emphasize this because I think this is one of the core things that a lot of men deal with, and probably a lot of women too, which is this idea no matter how hard I try, it's not enough. And that's because oftentimes in a relationship, the woman will step into kind of a motherly relationship with her husband, and she'll constantly be trying to fix him, right? Trying to make him better. Because the feminine nature, remember, is all about improvement and expansion and growth, and she's super aware of all the areas where the man is just not showing up the way that she wants him to. And so her natural instinct is to, like, I just want to fix him. I want to make him do this. If only he did this, then I'd be happy. And so what happens for the man is this core belief that says, no matter what I do, it's not enough. And it's super exhausting because no one wants to be fixed. No man wants to be mothered. And once again, for the man, the core need for the man is to feel respect. He wants to feel like the hero. And if he feels in any way like you're trying to fix him, then that shuts off that masculinity, and it's super frustrating because it goes back into that same pattern and says, oh my gosh, no matter what I do, I'm trying everything I can to make this woman happy, and it's still not enough. And that's incredibly emasculating to a man.
Well, and look, society's doing the same thing to men. Like I said, I talk about this in my book, Ancient Man, he pretty much had to provide shelter, and he had to go out and provide food, and he provided offspring, and he had his place in society. Success was really clear. That was how he was successful in his tribe. And then industrial man, he originally had to provide for his family, right? He provided an income and provided shelter, and that was great. But then all of a sudden he had to provide a refrigerator, and then he needed to provide indoor plumbing, and then he had to provide a radio and a TV and a car and a second car and now a boat, right? And then it shifts into modern man. A modern man is supposed to have everything together. And it's absolutely impossible for modern man to ever live up to society's standard of success because we have these ridiculous TV shows that show these billionaires that it only shows this little encapsulated part of their life. And we go, wow, he has his own island and he has his own spaceship. And it's like, how does a guy ever live up to anything? And so in his intimate relationship, what he wants in his core is to feel like a champion and to feel like he's successful. And so these women that come to me and they've driven their men into hiding, I'll explain to them that they need to be able to access this. And this is in particular in the bedroom. It might be in other areas. But if you want your man to emerge out of his shell, number one, men like checklists. They like operating manuals. And so when you explain in clear detail exactly what you would like him to do, and then this is the big part, you have to reward him for it. You have to tell him he did a good job. So if you're saying, honey, I need you to go load the dishwasher, and show him how to load the dishwasher, and then he loads it, you go, incredible job. You don't go in and reorganize it and go, hey, knucklehead, you could have put this here and that there and done it this way. If you punish him, then he won't come back and do it. I have this dog, Gerald, you've met my dog, and he is incredibly trained. He knows like 16 tricks or 19 tricks. He's unbelievable. He's so trained. But the one thing that the dog trainer, when we bought him, he said, you got to remember this, no matter what, you never, ever, 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 ever punish this dog when he comes to you. So no matter what he's doing, no matter what naughty thing he's done, no matter what, if he peed or pooped on your floor or he went and ran out in the road or anything, when you say, come, and the dog comes, you don't smack him. And it's the same way with men.
So true.
If you want your man to win, if you want to teach him that he is the champion of his little universe, then give him a clear operating manual. And I really think in terms, especially in the bedroom with sex, tell him exactly how to please you. And I promise you he's going to fumble around. And he's not going to do it right. And you're going to have to help him along. But don't smack him when he doesn't do it perfectly. Celebrate and make him feel like this success, that he's this champion and that he is the ultimate man to you. And when you do this, it causes him to emerge. But you can't bulldoze him into being the champion. That's where you accessing your sensuality and taking responsibility for your own pleasure in the bedroom. Don't leave it up to him to know how to bring you to climax and make it amazing. Take responsibility for that. But teach him what you want him to do, and then when he does it, celebrate him. Tell him how amazing that was and how great. And what you're doing is you're anchoring in him that he is a man, and he's going to start to stand in that masculine energy again. He's going to start to Be like, yes, I succeeded. I can't tell you how many guys say, I just wish I could make my wife happy. I do all this stuff. I scurry around. I fix all this stuff. I just want her to be happy. And if you give him the recipe, give him the operating manual, and then celebrate it when he does even anything remotely close to that, then he will stand in his masculine energy, and you'll start to get that need met of being able to let your guard down, let your shield off, and not carry that burden. And you can access those levels of pleasure that are only available when you really get into your body.
Yeah, that's great. And I just want to kind of summarize a few of the things Tony talked about, and also share some very specific things that you women can do to help us men step into and stay in our masculine energy and our power. So the first is understanding the core needs of the man, and this is fundamental. When you understand these needs, then it helps you to know how to communicate to him. It helps you to know how to elicit that masculine energy from him more fully. So, so for the man, their core need in the relationship is respect, and ultimately just to think he wants to feel like a hero. Now, this is assuming that it's a healthy relationship and a healthy man. There's a lot of men that have, bipolar or manic depressive or, narcissistic tendencies or whatever, and we're not talking about unhealthy relationships because it's different there, but in most healthy, normal relationships, the man has a serious desire to be a man and to be a good provider and to be supportive and to be loving. He wants to make his man happy, and for him,
his man,
he wants to.
I'm just making sure we're on the same page.
No, yeah, that's true. Like we could talk about alternative relationships here, but let's stay focused. So, thanks, Tony. That's why you're here.
I'm right here, man. I'm on this.
So he wants his woman to be happy, and that's how he measures success. Because a man, his whole paradigm is based on, I want to be successful, and I'm successful when my woman's happy. That's why he struggles so much when his woman is having normal emotions, and she's frustrated, or she's angry, or she's exhausted, or she's not happy, or she's depressed. He takes it all personally as it's his fault, and that means his responsibility, or he's not doing enough as a provider. And so for the man, he gets to understand that the woman's going to have her emotions, and that's okay. Like, he needs to be secure in himself enough to know that that he gets to continue to show up for her, but her emotions are okay, whatever they are. But in that space, some specific things that a woman can do to help nurture that masculinity is to do anything that makes him feel validated as the hero. So sincere acknowledgement, appreciation. So an idea like, what I've noticed is most men have the primary love languages of physical touch and words of affirmation. I know it's not completely true, and that's a little bit of a generalization, but would you say, Tony, that's kind of your core, is physical touch?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. It's interesting as you talk. I want to give an example, and I want you to jump back into that. As you're talking, I'm thinking about, I used to, when I would travel for work, I would call home, and my wife would tell me everything that was going wrong. And what I realized was she was just downloading all her stress. But what I heard was, I'm a bad provider, I'm a bad husband, I'm a disappointment, I can't please her no matter what. And I remember the day she called me, and I was bracing for this phone call, like, okay, I got to take my beat down. Hold on a second. I got to take my beat down for 15 minutes. I'll be back. Put out the clients on hold. I got on the phone, and she goes, I just want to tell you, I just appreciate so much that you put in all this effort and all this sacrifice to provide a really good life for us. That's all. I just want to tell you that I just think you're amazing. And I was like crying. I couldn't. It's like, whoa, who is this? I remember the first time she did that. And what you're talking about is, it's celebrating those little victories. And it's so impactful for a guy to have his woman say that. And then coupling that with physical touch, it's off the charts. If my wife comes and like rubs my shoulders or rubs my neck and says, I just think that you're amazing, or it says something positive, it's unbelievable to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We got a great question. Christina asked, so what about a man who takes offense when you're trying to guide him on what pleases you? So remember that, for a man, he wants to feel respected. So anytime you criticize him, anytime you try to fix him, it's going to feel like judgment on him that says he's not enough, and he's going to try to defend it. Like, this is natural part of our ego. It's just like, why are you trying to fix me? Aren't I enough of how I am? So the way you do it, rather than saying, hey, I want you to do this, don't say that, because for the man, that triggers him in saying, oh my gosh,
That's the bulldozer.
yeah, that's a bulldozer. Instead, compliment him on what he's doing and do it kind of in an indirect way. Say, oh my gosh, honey, I love it so much when you do this. This really means a lot to me. And he's like, oh, really? Right? And like, I noticed the same scenario. Like, this is a classic experience, like when I was married. So I always felt like, I wanted to support my wife, and because she was so, busy with the kids, and she would work so hard to, like, create dinner and to cook and do everything else. And so in my mind, I thought, it's her responsibility to wash the dishes, but that's why I'm willing to do that. So I made a commitment to kind of wash the dishes every night, because she had been, like, really exhausted. And for me, in my man's mind, if it was my responsibility, I wouldn't have wanted to do it. But because I felt like it was her responsibility, then I wanted to step up, because I knew it was a way to make her feel loved. So there was one time in particular that I was, doing the dishes, and as guys, sometimes our mind gets a little bit distracted, and sometimes we're not really focused. So I was thinking about work and a project that I was doing as I was putting away the dishes and putting the things away. And then one of the things that that I remember, and she was frustrated at the time, and she came over and she looked, and she like, really, Gerald, how long have you lived here? Why did you put the measuring cups up with the normal glasses, right? And it's a super valid question. It's just like, yeah, that was completely unconscious. But what I heard inside my little man, Brian, was, you're not good enough. I don't appreciate what you do. No matter what you try, you're never going to be good enough for me. That's how I interpreted it, right? Just because it came from a form of criticism or correction, and like, admittedly, like, I should have known better, but that's where I was at, right? So notice the transition towards other times where she would come, and I'd be doing the dishes, and she'd come back, stroke the back of my neck, and say, oh my gosh, I really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me that you're helping around like this. And that was like, oh, right. It turned me on. It was like, oh my gosh, what else can I do? Please tell me, what else can I do? And so just notice the difference between those two responses. If you want your man to step into being more of a man, validate him on what he does right. And once again, if you can combine physical touch with words of affirmation, and just acknowledge him on that and say, honey, thank you so much. I really appreciate when you do this. Oh, thank you so much for listening and just being able to validate. I really love it. And to also guide him and say, I would love to be able to share some ideas or thoughts, or, I got so much going on inside my brain. Would you just be willing to listen to me? And, I don't need you to fix anything. I just need you to listen. Would that be okay? So kind of let him know what you want, but come from a point of asking for help versus telling him what to do. Because for a man, as he wants to feel like a hero, when you ask for help and say, wow, it would really mean a lot. Would you be able to help me with this? You're so good at this, right? He's like, yeah, sure, I would love to help you out. If you tell him, hey, go do this, because go take out the garbage, because it's been 3 days, and like, what are you doing? Then he's not going to want to take out the garbage. But he says, oh my gosh, thank you so much for all the help you do. Would you be willing to take out the garbage? That would mean so much to me. He's like, yeah, sure, I would love to. So you ask him for help and ask him for advice. That's another way to elicit the masculine support. I saw someone, I think Melissa or someone else, commented that the sooner you ask for support in a relationship, the more it connects you. Like, when you ask for help and let him know that you appreciate him being the man for you, it allows him to feel like the hero. Anything that makes him feel like the hero makes him feel like a man.
The other thing I think you got to remember, particularly with this question about sex, is that you almost across the board, when a man has his clothes off, he feels incredibly vulnerable. And this is ingrained in him from the time he's a teenager, and he and he has to stand in the locker room and change his clothes in front of other boys who are at different levels of puberty, and the boys comparing the size of their penises with each other, and the porn culture that tells a man he has to have a 13-inch penis in order to be a man. There is such a level of insecurity when his clothes are off that he's incredibly vulnerable to any messages that say, you are not a man, you're not manly. And when a woman is not responding, that's the message he often gets. Like, you suck, man, you're no good. You can't do this right. If you were a real man, you would know how to please me. That's the message that gets internalized. And so if in that space, the instruction is like the bulldozer that's like, hey, do this. No, not like that. Do this. And his message is, he's like a child on a certain level going, I'm trying. Please validate me that I'm a man here. And so that's the bulldozer method, is to say, hey, do this. The flower method is more seductive. The flower method, and I hate to make this analogy because I know it's going to offend some women, but if you think about, like, we've all seen movies. I mean, some of us have been to strip clubs, and the rest of us have seen movies of strip clubs where these women they're sensual, and they're in their body, and they're playful, and they're really alluring. And I'm not advocating that that's where you learn all your sex from, because it's made up, right? The best strippers are the ones that convince a man that they'd be doing this whether he was paying them or not. And so that's, but we can learn from these things, just like we can learn from chick flicks, right? Guys, we can break down a chick flick and say, what caused arousal in the woman? These dynamic pieces of it. That's how I teach men how to seduce their wives, is often through that model. But if we think about, what would the woman who was completely confident sexually and into herself, how would she draw that man into her rather than forcing him to do something? And so I would say to have it be sort of a seductive, sultry thing, and be, give him the whispery voice. It's so funny. I don't know if I should tell this story, but when I was a teenager, I dated this girl, and she called me up one night, and it was like midnight, and she had this music playing in the background. It was like, I remember it was this Madonna song, Justify My Love, and she's whispering into the phone. It was so sexy. It was unbelievable. And she's like, what would you do to me next? And I'm just like, oh, man, what? I thought my brain was going to explode. She was so sexy, and she was like talking about all these little things. I'd like it if you did this to me. And I'm just like, and I didn't know what to even do with myself. It was a really good thing for me that she moved like a week later. But that sort of energy is the flower, right? So instead of saying, hey, do this, do that, make it really sexy and be like, oh, baby, I would love it if you did this. Oh, make it kind of this fantasy, and whisper it into his ear. I have this fantasy that you do this, or you do it this way. Oh, I'd love it if you did this to me, right? Then it's sexy. It creates that energy of the draw and the attraction, and it makes the man feel like a champion, because he's like, and then you got to respond, even if you fake it. I know a lot of times women fake it, but that's reinforcing on a certain level that you're validating him. So if his clothes are off, he's super, super, super vulnerable. So be careful about critiquing him in that moment. You might also do it at dinner in a safe place, and in a public setting where you can be like, hey, I would love it if we could go home and you did this to me. And he'll be like, really? Because it's not vulnerable. His clothes aren't off. He's not like fumbling around trying to be a man. He's like sitting there eating dinner going, what did you just say? Tell me exactly how, right? So that's the magic of the feminine energy, of learning how to play those emotions off the man and make it seductive and become the magnet rather than the bulldozer.
Yeah, those are great conversations.
I shouldn't have told that story, huh?
No, you totally.
Well, I haven't seen this girl in 25 years, and I will never forget that phone call. It was so awesome.
I love it, Tony, and phone sex as a teenager. That's awesome, Tony. I'm so glad. I'm so glad we could have this inspired conversation tonight. That's awesome. So there's so much more we could talk about, but rather than Tony and I kind of having this discussion, what I want to do is just move into questions and answers right now. And so I know there's been some questions that have been asked already, but this is opportunity for you to just ask your questions and and we'll just take the next few minutes until we want to jump off and until we get tired of this to just kind of respond. So, hey, Tony, if you want to just get a visual of this, if you want to go to hangoutwithgerald.com, you can kind of look at the chat right there.
That's a website?
Yeah, so just hangoutwithgerald.com. So here's a question that Melissa just asked that says, whatever happened to being best friends, where we can just talk openly about anything and say anything? You know me well enough to know a comment I was made was only out of love and kindness. Is that not possible? The reality is, in an ideal relationship, of course, there's that sense of connection and vulnerability where you're never going to show up perfectly all the time, right? You're never going to always manage your emotions, and sometimes you're going to say things that you regret, and that's part of a relationship, and we get it, and we get to heal through that. But understand that for all of us, there's always going to be these like wounded little triggers inside of us that are going to be sensitive, and the more we can be aware of communication skills, and the more we can be aware of how the words that we speak are being, reacted to and how they're being responded to, the more awareness and the more connection and intimacy we have. So there's, in terms of connection and intimacy and communication, both people have a responsibility. We have a responsibility as the speaker, as a communicator in that form, to be able to say, okay, what really helps my partner feel loved and validated and appreciated? How can I help meet her needs or his needs in that relationship? And so we have a responsibility to manage our words and to speak in a way that supports them to be able to receive the message we're communicating. The other side of our role as a communicator is to be able to listen effectively and to be able to listen beyond the emotion. And even if the other person is showing up as a less effective communicator and they're angry or they're resentful or they're saying critical or hurtful things, as the listener in the conscious communicator role, we get to say, okay, well, I understand what she's saying beneath that thing, and I understand that she's just saying that because she's frustrated or she's angry, and I totally get that, and I can just show up present and powerful and allow her to be in whatever space she's in, right? And so I think that as conscious communicators, we have both of those roles to be effective in the words that we speak, but also to be effective in listening, because we can't expect the other person in the relationship to always show up conscious, because, I mean, let's face it, we're not either. But these are skills that we get to practice and that we get to work on.
I got a little interruption. I'm on a phone call right now, but so the other thing I wanted to say on that one is that when we have to remember this, that we're not coming to the relationship generally as whole, complete people. We all have vulnerabilities. We all have childhood junk. We all have unresolved issues. And so whatever feedback you're giving him, he may not be hearing it in love. It may be reinforcing his deeper childhood wounds that he needs to work on. And so the best way for you to help him with that is for you to work on your unresolved childhood junk and your pain, because you open and then start to talk about the breakthroughs that you've had. It's just like when he gives you certain feedback, it could be an observation, it could just be like a general observation, but you take it very deeply and personally because it's some kind of past, some kind of wound from the past. So when we understand that, we might be communicating one thing and they're hearing something completely different. And so one way to help with that, I don't know if you guys have, Melissa, if you've been to Live Big, I can't remember if you came or not, but one of the things we teach is a communication strategy on how to actually communicate things that generally where our partner puts up a wall. And there's techniques that we can use and actual little communication practices, scripted communication practices, where we can communicate things where we feel like we're not being heard. And then it allows us to do that. So we have to learn the skills of communicating things, because they're not going to hear what we intend to communicate to them.
Yeah, and as we step into this idea of being a conscious creator, we realize that we will have emotions, and all these emotions are just feedback, right? And we're constantly being given feedback to, okay, is the way that I'm communicating working, or is it not? Is it getting the result that I want or not? And when we notice that we get emotional, or that we want to react, or that we want to try to justify or defend or attack, we get to realize, oh my gosh, I'm being triggered. And when we can take full accountability for our own emotions, then we can recognize that and say, oh wow, well, I need to take some time to go through some internal work and figure out, okay, what am I hearing? What am I believing? What are the choices that I'm making that is creating this emotion inside me? And on the other side of being a conscious creator and communicating and speaking, we can notice if they're reacting, then we can recognize that they're being triggered by something we say. And if we're not intending to trigger them, then we understand that it is their trigger, but we still have a responsibility on our side to say, okay, how can I communicate in a way that's not going to affect their trigger, or just to allow them to have their reaction, have their emotion, and to just realize that ultimately they're acting out of a childhood wound from the past, and they're projecting or they're hearing something from the way that we're speaking that is simply triggering that wound.
And what happens when you learn this, it doesn't mean this goes away. It means that you can start to own when you're triggered. So like a few days ago, I was in this place where I was actually having this conversation with Bree, and I said, you know, it's intriguing to me that for a lot of guys, having intimacy with their wife, the investment to experience intimacy with their wife is so high, and the investment to have intimacy outside of their marriage is so much easier. And I'm like, it's screwed up. And I really think it's true. If a man, especially if a man's in his masculine energy, he has opportunities to have sex outside of the marriage without a high investment that is often easy. And we were having this conversation, and I got a little bit triggered into one of my wounds. And one of my wounds is I can't have everything that I want. And so in that space of getting triggered, I actually acknowledged that. And it was really interesting because we have this open dialogue. Bree's like, yeah, I kind of think you're in your victim story. And I was like, yeah, I am. I'm kind of having this feeling of like, wow. And really ultimately it came down to I wanted to connect with her. I wanted to make love. And I wasn't very effectively communicating that, but I could own that I was feeling triggered in my own victim story. So it doesn't mean that once we learn this that we grow past it, we never get triggered again. That's not the case at all. We still get triggered, but in the moment of being triggered, we can actually own it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm totally in my victim story. And I can just say, I'd like to make love. Like, does that sound something, is that interesting? Can I create an environment where that can happen? And I got out of my own story in that space. And so when both people are on that page of knowing the wounds, knowing the patterns, having done this personal development, this transformation work, then our communication changes. Because in the past, I would have just shut down and felt sorry for myself and put up a wall and should have been like, why are you distant? Why have you withdrawn? Because I was in my victim story. So as you start to learn your own patterns and learn his patterns and do your healing, he may not do his healing, but you can do your healing. That's all you can do. And in you doing your healing, it invites him into that healed conversation. It's a whole different thing.
Yeah,
there's another good question on here.
That's very good. I want to. Christina had mentioned her and her husband are watching this together, and I love the fact that you guys are watching this together. It says a lot about you and your relationship, and the fact that he's willing to actually go through this. Because one of the challenges a lot of relationships have is like one partner is like wanting to grow, wanting to expand, wanting to fix it, and the other person's not. The fact that both of you are wanting to work on it, that says so much for the health of your relationship and the possibilities that are there. But the question that he asks is, how can I do something I've never been taught before? He grew up in a negative home, and his wife wants praise and words of affirmation. That's an important love language for her and for her kids. But growing up in that negative home, he was never really taught how to give authentic acknowledgement or words of appreciation. And so he wants to know, saying other than "you're beautiful," where to start. So I want to caveat this in saying what we are covering today is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, and hopefully you've gained some ideas and thoughts. I have a book that's coming out here in the next about month and a half called Marriage Advice I Wish I Would Have Had. It's based on the epic post that I wrote a while back. But in preparation for that, I'm actually going to be doing a series of free coaching calls to train people specifically on how to create breakthroughs in their relationship. And so whether you're single, divorced, or you're still married, have a healthy marriage or a struggling marriage, there's going to be some core principles where I get really down to the nitty-gritty practices of how to create those breakthroughs. And that's going to be a free gift that I offer, a 30-day coaching process where over 4 weeks we go through some really valuable training. At the very bottom of this page, after we're all done, you can enter your name and email and then register for that. Just wait until everything's wrapped up, but make sure you fill that out. That will register you for that free coaching series that we're going to be doing, where we can actually train you on some of the more specifics about that. So at the end of this call, once again, just fill out that form and you can opt in and be part of this free coaching that we're doing. But here's some specific things that might be valuable for you as you're looking to know how to validate Christina and your kids. And realize, I wish I knew your name, but realize that it's really about practice, right? All of this is about practice and becoming a little bit better all the time. So in that effort to become better, it's just like looking what works, what doesn't, and maybe Christina can kind of offer you some coaching. So, these are some things that really make me feel appreciated. These are some things you can say. But in general, the more specific you can be with compliments, the more valuable they are received. So just look for things that you honestly appreciate. Say, oh my gosh, that dress looks really sexy on you. Or to be able to say, wow, honey, I really appreciate how you make me feel. Like there's something just about being around you that I really love. Or to be able to say, look her in her eyes and say, I really love that sparkle in your eyes. You just make me happy. Those type of things, like the more specific you can be, the easier it is for her to be able to receive that. And then you can look at things that she does around the house and say, wow, I really appreciate it. You are such a phenomenal mother. I really appreciate everything you do, and I just want you to know, I can't imagine life without you. So just talk about those things and talk about, other specific things that you appreciate and say, you are really so good about that. Thank you so much. Or anything she does, something specific that makes you feel validated or loved or appreciated. Look for those moments to celebrate with her and make it authentic. The other things that you can do is like sometimes just a really simple surprise, right? Just to be able to leave a secret note that she'll find around the house, or send her a text in the middle of the day that says, hey honey, I was just thinking about you and I just want you to know you are so beautiful and I'm so grateful that you're my wife. Can you imagine like what those will do in terms of making deposits in her love account? And just consider that, and just allow it to be practice, right? Every day say, what can I look for in my wife that I can acknowledge and appreciate? And Christina, on your side, just recognize that he's never going to be perfect at it, and it's not about being perfect, but really acknowledge him. And every time he says something that is a meaningful compliment, say, thank you so much. It really makes me feel great when you say those things.
It's just like the dog. It's just like the dog training. You got to praise him. You got to be like, good. Thank you. I really appreciate that you did that. And Gerald, can I say something to her husband?
Yeah, absolutely.
Make this look. I would recommend that you schedule it into your phone or wherever you keep your calendar. And I know I had one person that her husband found that he had scheduled into his phone to send her flowers, or to call and compliment, or send her a text to compliment her. And it actually showed up in his calendar as a reminder. And she was offended, and she said, if you have to be reminded by your calendar that it wasn't an authentic expression, which I think that is punishing and caused him to do less of that. And so he actually had to change it in his phone to say something like, plan your day, and that was code word for send your wife a nice text and tell her that you love her. So if you have to hide it from her, that's fine. Hide it. But I would actually say schedule this in and put little reminders in whatever you use. It's a phone, if it's a computer calendar, if it's a piece of paper, and however you plan your week, put it in there to remind you, because this is really important to her, and you're not doing it, not because you're a jerk, not because you're a bad husband. You're doing it because it's not your love language, right? We do our love language. So for me, touch and words of affirmation are my two love languages. So I hug people and I tell them they're great. But I have a daughter who's a quality time person and who is a gifts person, and those are not my love languages. And what I have to do, it doesn't feel natural for me to go and do those things, but I want her to feel loved. So I actually have to sit down with my calendar and say, what's a quality time activity we can do, and schedule it in, and then she's super happy about it. My wife, it's the same thing. It's like gifts for me. If someone sends me flowers, it actually annoys me, because I'm like, oh man, where am I going to put these? And then in like 10 days, they're going to start falling all over, and then I'm going to have to clean my desk, and it's just going to be this mess, and I'm not allowed to throw them away because they're flowers people gave me.
Gosh, I need to remember.
It annoys the crap out of me.
Jeez.
I hate it.
I got to stop sending those to you. I
know.
What would Tony appreciate? Like, look at these daffodils. I just think he wants these.
This is my way of sending the message gently that I hate it, so stop. But my wife loves it. She loves flowers. She thinks they're the most amazing thing ever. So I actually put reminders into my phone, and I don't do it every day, the same day, or I don't do it every 2 weeks on the same day, because then it becomes routine. She's like, oh, it's the second Tuesday. He's going to give me flowers. I have it repeat like every 17 days. And so that there's kind of like a little bit of spontaneity and surprise, so it appears. And ultimately, she loves it, and she feels good about it. So I would tell this guy, first of all, I tell Christina, just give him the operating manual. Tell him exactly what would make you feel fantastic. Make it real simple. He's saying, I never heard this before. Why am I supposed to be able to speak Chinese when I've never taken a lesson in Chinese? And that's ultimately what we're trying to ask him to do. So I'm saying, teach him 4 or 5 words in Chinese, put a reminder in your phone, and then go up and go, ha chu, chong ching, cha cha. You know what I mean? Make it really simple, and then when he does it, rub him on the head and tell him he's good. Tell him he's awesome. Actually, don't rub him on the head. He'll feel like a little boy. Rub him on the back of his neck and tell him he's amazing. And he'll just be like, I'm going to say that kind of stuff more often. You got to reward him. That's how you start to get what you, that's the flower drawing it in and start to get what you want from the man.
Yeah, I think those are great reminders just to, Daniel, for you to, be very specific, and for Christina to be able to be very specific in terms of what you want, and make it easy for him to win. Make it easy for him to win. And understand that in relationships, because we all have our own problems, sometimes even if one person is trying their very best, if the other person has a core belief that says, I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or I don't deserve to be loved, even like I notice this, I notice this in my own relationship, but other relationships too. Like sometimes, like I would want to say, you're so beautiful, but in her mind, she didn't want to be beautiful. That's not the way that she wanted to experience value. She was extraordinarily gorgeous, but in her mind, being beautiful was a weakness or something she didn't want to be, right? And I think likewise, I noticed in our relationship, like I craved like to be acknowledged. I craved to be able to be supported and in those words of affirmation, but that really wasn't her love language. And so I remember maybe like 2 times in our 16 years where she, said I was handsome or something. And what's interesting is sometimes we look for something from the other person that we're never going to get. And it's unfair to kind of expect that from them, because that's so foreign to their nature. When they do, acknowledge it, appreciate it, make it easy for them to win. But I noticed this comment from someone else, Mary Jane, was saying, what can you do if time after time a wife has told her husband how important positive affirmations are to her, and yet he continually just won't do it? I mean, rarely compliments at all. So understand that this isn't in his nature, and to ask him to change, it's a fair request. It's fair that you want this, and it's fair for you to hunger for this and to yearn for him to say, wow, I just really appreciate who you are. Thank you so much. To be able to have him say, you're so beautiful. I love, just looking at you, and for you to, like, you want these, and it's okay for you to crave that, and to even to say that, but even to request it, but it's also not going to be natural for him to do that all the time. And I don't know, Tony, what are your thoughts if you're in a relationship and you have a core need? This is maybe a hard conversation, but if you have a core need, whether it's physical touch or words of affirmation or quality time, gifts or acts of service, and the other person just is not willing to give that to you, or not able to give that to you, or despite repeated requests, they just don't get it. Like, what advice would you give to someone that's in a relationship like that, where they're just not getting their needs met that are important to them?
This is a tough one. I'm reading one of the comments here where she says, I say positive things, I compliment, our sex life's fantastic, but I'm dead last when it comes to priority in his life. I don't know what more I can do. I give and give and give, and he doesn't. I mean, it's the same conversation here. There's going to be something, no matter what relationship we're in, where our partner just doesn't get it. And it's interesting. I had this conversation with a guy that is
First off, just bring him to live big. That's what we're going to say. Bring him to live
sure.
big, and we'll help, whack him across the face, kick him in the face so they wake up. But the reality is some people aren't ready to wake up, right? And especially a lot of men are just unconscious, and they're not wanting to change. They're wanting to grow. Because the man's whole identity is based on creating things that are the same and creating things that are predictable. So even like personal growth or personal development are hard for them. And sometimes it's not until they're threatened by a fear or whacked across the head, they're like, oh my gosh, I need to change, I need to fix this, I need to figure things out. But hopefully if they're open enough to either be part of the relationship call or come to live big, then we can slap them upside the head and hopefully wake them up and give them some tools that will really support you. Go ahead, Tony, continue.
I think about this with I think there's like certain things in my relationship with one of the challenges I have is I have these different relationships that I compare to my marriage, and each of the different relationships, these women had a strength that I compare against my wife's weaknesses, and it's like if I compare, when I was 15 years old and I had that phone call with that girl that I'll never forget, if I compare that against my wife, who has 5 kids and writing a book and has all these demands in her world, and I'm like, hey, how come you can't just be carefree and fun and sensual and stay on the phone with me all night like a 15-year-old? It's not a fair comparison to compare their strengths against her weaknesses, and she could do the same thing with the guys that she dated, and so there's these, like, my wife had this thing where she loves to play. She loves to play games. I don't. I dislike games. I feel like it's unproductive use of my time as a human being. I have all these things I want to create so that I can feel good about myself. So I'm fixated on the things I'm creating, and games are this annoying thing where I could have like finished a chapter on my book, or I could have created something, or I could have had something to show for it. And games in her world are love, because her dad played games when they were kids. Her family played games. Her grandparents played games. Her aunt and uncles, they all got together, they played games. Some of her happiest times are around the table playing card games. And I didn't get this. It didn't make sense to me. And it was against my nature. And so it's likely that we're going to have things like this in our relationship with our partner. I was blocked on this. I just didn't get it. It's like a foreign language. And then there's things in how I wish that she would interact with me that were so foreign to her, because she grew up with a hypercritical mom, and it wasn't safe to express in certain ways because of the dangerous environment she grew up with. And so there's all these behind the scenes things, and then we get busy in our life. And so there was this one day where I had a real heart to heart with my wife, and I said, look, I know this sounds like I'm being a jerk, and it's a horrible, awful thing that I'm saying, and this is how I really feel. I want a girlfriend, and I really want that to be you. But I feel emotionally committed to having a girlfriend. And I so much want that to be in our relationship, but my energy is drawing towards having someone I can be a girlfriend with. And so she then opened the door for expression, and she goes, I feel like there's this part of our relationship where there's this part of me that I've so desperately wanted to feel and to express, and I feel like there's this part of me that has died, and that I'm trying to mourn. And so we both took a look at the relationship at that point, and she said, how can I be your girlfriend? And we had to start dating. And what that meant was I had to go make more money to hire babysitters, and I had to take away the burdens that were exhausting her emotional energy so that I could have a girlfriend. And in her case of me playing, I had to realize the importance of playing games. And I still don't like them that much, but I do. And I sit down and I play these long, drawn-out card games because I saw that there was this part of her that was dying, and it was as as desperately painful as me feeling like I didn't have a girlfriend, like we were just playing house. And so there's sometimes we can learn to have a moment of communication and openness where we actually hear the other person. And that's why we do this relationship technique at Live Big, where we have this communication technique that we show you how to get past the initial walls to the deeper stuff, and then start to actually structure things in. And for me, I actually plan into my planner activities that my wife says are going to be fun. And I normally wouldn't do those activities. But I do it because I want her to feel that full expression of love, because when she's in that love, she's more attentive to my needs. And so it's this back and forth. And she knows when she's attentive to my needs, I'm more open to doing those things. And so it starts from us figuring out what's the part in them that we haven't been meeting. Because we can't change them, and we can't just say, hey, you change and then I'll be happy. It doesn't work that way. And then really make a massive investment. And for the woman who says, I give and I give and I give and I give and I don't get back, it's really challenging. I mean, there's no easy answer to that, other than you might look for an opportunity to like this communication technique we teach at Live Big, and I teach in our relationship videos, and sit down with your husband and say, we need to have this conversation. And it's a structured conversation so the walls don't go up. And it's an opportunity for him to maybe hear specifically how important something is to you, without the message being, you suck, you're a loser. And if you can communicate it in that way and it actually reaches in, and then help him schedule those things in, there's a higher likelihood of those activities happening. So that's how I would answer that. Not sure. I know Gerald just texted.
I'm back, Tony.
Okay.
I know. Yeah, my computer just crashed again. I'm so frustrated because I just upgraded my operating system on my Mac, and I guess sometimes this is what happens when we're trying to make changes in our life. Things just crash on us.
I love it. I just kept on talking. I wasn't sure if you were coming back or not, but
no, it's perfect. And and we'll probably just go a few more minutes here. But I number one, just want to acknowledge everyone for being here. This is so fun for me, even though I can't have you all in my little living room right here. It's fun to be able to have this conversation and to be able to share this time with you, and it's fun to see your comments, and I just really want to acknowledge you. Just if you've enjoyed, being able to have this time to, start this week and to be part of this conversation, just type something in the bar just to let us know, what you've thought about this, and if you think that maybe we should do this again sometime. But I want to kind of jump into some closing thoughts that maybe might help you, and then I actually want to take you through a little visualization process as you start this week, just to anchor in some really positive emotions, make sure that you're ready for this week, and that you're ready to take advantage of whatever opportunities lie ahead for you this week. So I just also want to remind you that if you at the end of the call want to be part of the relationship coaching program that I'm creating in preparation for the book launch, is after we're all done, just fill in that opt-in form at the bottom, and I'll send you the information as soon as we have that program ready. And then also just an invitation, if you haven't been to Live Big yet, or if you want to come again, just send me a private message on Facebook and let me say, hey, I want to come to Live Big. Tony and I our next one's coming up on May 29th through 31st. We also have Tony's wife Bree that's going to be there, and also Marcy Locke is going to be part of that as well. In terms of your trainers, it's phenomenal 3 days where we get to do the deep internal work that's required to create the type of loving relationships that you want. So once again, send me a private message if you're interested and want some more information about coming to Live Big, and then also invite you to be part of that relationship coaching program that we have for you as well. So Tony, just what are some final thoughts that you'd like to offer everyone that's on this call?
Relationships are this mystery. You don't ever figure them all the way out. But it is I think it's like a soul journey of continuing to seek to have those deeper needs met, and that causes us to have to grow to be able to reach those, because they don't get met unless we grow, and then we'll have new needs and we'll have to grow, and it's this never-ending mystery. We don't ever fully arrive, but we have these really cool experiences along the way when we can find that oneness and that connection periodically, and that's what we're continuing to strive back towards. So if you haven't had that, that's okay. Keep working towards that and keep growing in yourself. And if you have had it, then just it's this endless quest to keep trying to find that and get back to that place of oneness. It's just like the spiritual journey. We might have a moment of oneness, and then we lose it. And so we have to continually realign ourselves. And so if you're not in it, don't make it wrong. It's just part of the path, and keep seeking.
Yeah, great concepts. And I guess closing thoughts that I would offer is, I was doing a radio interview recently, and the interviewer asked, "So why do you think divorce is such a problem these days?" And I said, "Divorce isn't a problem." He was like, "What? What do you mean?" I said, "Divorce isn't a problem. Divorce is the result. The problem lays way beneath the surface. Divorce is simply the fruit that happens from these dysfunctional relationships, but the reason why they're dysfunctional is because the roots are off, and the roots are our own personal ability to show up in a healthy way in those relationships. And so ultimately the work that is required to create those dynamic, healthy, thriving, passionate, intimate relationships that we desire and deserve is internal personal work. And it's easy for us to point our finger to the spouse or the other person and say, if only they would do this, then I'd be happy. Or if he would show up this way, or if he would offer words of affirmation, or if he would do this or that, then I'd be happy. But the reality is we never have control over the other person. We never will. So for us, our gift, our opportunity in being conscious creators is to ask, okay, how can I show up better? How can I nurture this relationship? How can I communicate more effectively? How can I heal my own triggers so that I can be healthy? And when both partners are fully committed to being conscious creators in the relationship, then having an amazing, thriving, healthy, passionate relationship is easy. And in this space, hopefully you've gained some insights in terms of how to show up a little more effectively or powerfully in your relationships. But my invitation for you is simply continue on this journey. It's just like Tony is saying, don't expect this to ever be perfect. Don't expect your relationship to be perfect, because it's not meant to be perfect. It's just like life. Life is a journey. Life is growth. Life is challenge. Life is expansion. Life is discovery. Life is breaking down and breaking through. So when you allow yourself to be imperfect in that journey and to be recommitted to being a conscious creator and more aware, then all of a sudden you have this whole new possibility, a whole new ability to make shifts when those shifts need to happen, and just stay committed to it long term. So just really want to thank you and acknowledge you. Before I do the final wrap-up process, Tony, any final thoughts that you want to share?
Come to live big. We're going to have a heck of a time. It's going to be great.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so once again, I want to thank you, acknowledge you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you just relax for a moment, and I'm going to take you through a very short visualization process. And the hope is to anchor in some really positive emotions and positive inspiration to help you to start your day off right. I mean, start your week off right. So as we're kind of wrapping up this evening, I'm just going to invite you to just take a big deep breath in and breathe out. And just take a big deep breath in, and as you breathe in, just simply allow your eyelids to close down. Just close your eyelids down now, and as you continue to breathe in and breathe out, just allow each breath to allow you to be more present and aware. And simply listen to the sound of my voice. And as you listen to the sound of my voice, allow yourself to be aware of this abundance of life. And allow every breath that you take to be a reminder to you, a reminder that God always provides everything that you need. Every breath you take is a reminder that says you have what you need at this moment, and this moment is perfect. A reminder that says you don't need to worry about the past, the mistakes or the successes of the past. You don't need to worry about the future and all the responsibilities and all the things you need to do in the future. Just allow yourself to be in this present moment and to realize that everything is perfect in this moment now. And in this moment now, in your mind's eye, you begin to sense in your body, in your being, in your mind, in your spirit, this sense of perfection and wholeness, reminding you that you are a powerful and divine creator, that you have unlimited potential to create the life that you desire and that you deserve, and that as a conscious creator, you have this unbelievable capacity to experience goodness, wealth, and abundance in your life. And in your mind's eye, just allow yourself to feel what it feels like, knowing that you are whole, knowing that you're perfect, knowing that you're protected. Allow this light to flow through your body, beginning at the crown of your head and pouring down. Just imagine that this light is flowing through every cell of your body, cleansing out any darkness, any fear, anything that would prevent you from having the confidence that you desire, and knowing that that light, as it purifies your body, reconnects you to a sense of the truth of who you are, that you are divine, you are beautiful, you are capable of achieving whatever you want. And in your mind's eye, as you think forward to this week, just know that as you stand in this power and this light and this truth of who you are, that you can create more inspired and connected and loving relationships in your life. To realize that you don't need to show up perfectly in this relationship, but you get to choose to show up fully and authentically, and to love with your hearts wide open, and to give generously this love that is naturally who you are. So as you continue to breathe in and out in this moment, just allow yourself to feel this love surging through your body for the people in your life, for your children, for your spouse or your loved ones, for the other connections that you have for your life, and spreading through to the other relationships. As you feel this love pour through you, just feel this awareness that your love has no limit, that you have the ability to love unconditionally and openly from this vast open well that has no bottom. And as you continue to breathe in and out, just allow that light to flow through you. In a moment, I'm going to count from 1 to 3. When I say the number 3, you'll simply open your eyes, excited and ready for the adventures today. And as you go to bed tonight, all of these positive thoughts, all these messages will sink deep inside you, so that as you wake in the morning, you have enthusiasm and you have this desire to embrace the possibilities that Monday brings. As you rest tonight, you'll rest peacefully and soundly, and your body will do perfectly what it needs to support you in creating the health and energy that you need to be able to experience this week. In a moment, I'm going to count from 1 to 3. When I say the number 3, you'll simply open your eyes, ready to take on this adventure of this week, and ready to relax fully this evening. Number 1, energy will return to your body. Number 2, feeling as though you've been bathed in this crystal clear brook. On the next number 3, you'll wake up wide awake. 1, 2, 3, open your eyes. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tony and I have had such a blast being able to share this inspired conversation with you. Thank you for enduring the technical difficulties that we've had here and there, and for sticking on. It really says so much about who you are. I love you, and I'm so grateful for your presence in my life. I'm so grateful to have you as a friend. I'm so grateful for this bond and connection we have, and I'm so grateful that we get to continue this journey. I look forward to being with you again soon, and until then, remember, you've got one life to live.
Live big.
Live big. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Take care, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.